Good morning, everybody. My name is Malia Spinda. I would like to call to order the February 27th, 2023 meeting of the Salary Commission. Commissioner, please call the roll to confirm the attendance of commissioners at this meeting and presence of quorum, acknowledging that one member has indicated that she is stuck in a little traffic.
Malia,
Here,
Carolee,
Present.
David,
excused.
Leela.
Here.
Sarah,
She will be, so come back to that.
Rebecca.
Ew.
You have 4 members, you have quorum.
Thank you so much. Given the presence of quorum, let us continue on with our agenda. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for the adjustment of our schedule to this day to accommodate a member who has some other pressing issues as well.
Very much.
So on with our agenda and the business of the commission. So to begin with, we are on report on the long-term strategy for the Salary Commission. And at our previous meeting, the commission formed a permitted interaction group, or a PIG, to study, discuss, and report on long-term strategies for keeping salaries for Honolulu city officials competitive with salaries for similar positions in other governmental jurisdictions and in the private sector. So we do have a report. So at this time, I'd like to, it is part of your package. And inclusive in that report, we members, myself, Rebecca Soon, and Sarah Gay, who will be with us shortly. We did meet and we did have a really good discussion about how we might approach this. And in summary, we would like to create a letter to Chair Waters, asking for an authorization of up to 100,000 for the development of a salary study. And then asking for the support of administrative officer in developing and executing an RFP for a third party to conduct that salary study. We would anticipate that we would create, I believe we would create another PIG for that purpose at that time. But at this moment, for this purpose, we share with you both the report and also, which largely mirrors the report, a draft letter to Chair Waters for the sake of complete transparency, that everybody knows how we want to approach this. And I think at this time that's it. We have questions next for the next meeting.
Yes, for this one, you don't have public testimony.
Yeah. All right, so for your consideration, members, so thank you. Thank you to my fellow group members and for helping to craft the material and for the thoughtfulness around the conversation. All right, we're gonna keep moving. I think I need to stick with go back to the script. Please remember that the Sunshine Law prohibits the commission from engaging in discussion or deliberation on the PIG report until our next commission meeting. We will now proceed with public testimonies. Do we have any registered testifiers?
Not for the strategy report.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to testify? There being no testifiers, commissioners, we will move on to the next agenda. All right, we are on 4. We're moving right along. The annual review of salaries and salary schedules pursuant to section 3-122 of the revised charter of the city and county of Honolulu. This commission is tasked with performing an annual review of salaries and salary schedules for those elected and appointed officials listed in section 3-122 of the revised charter of the city and county of Honolulu 2017 edition, including the following: mayors, council members, prosecuting attorney, first deputy prosecuting attorney, managing director, deputy managing director, police chief, deputy police chiefs, fire chief, deputy fire chief, medical examiner, deputy medical examiner, band director, other department heads and deputy department heads. Schedule of salaries of deputies of the corporation council and schedule of salaries of deputies of the prosecuting attorney. At our previous meeting, the commission voted to form a permitted interaction group, or a PIG, to investigate modifications to the current salaries and salary schedule for these positions. Please remember that the Sunshine Law prohibits the commission from engaging in any discussion or deliberation on the PIG's report until our next commission meeting. The three commissioners on the current salaries PIG are David Hayakawa, Rebecca Soon, and Lila Tom. We will now hear the PIG's report on their findings and recommendations relating to the setting of city officer salaries for the coming fiscal year.
And Madam Chair, were you gonna do testimony after?
Mhm.
Okay, got it.
Would you have a preference?
It might help to hear from testifiers before. but
Members, is that
it's up to
okay?
us. It's up to you.
Usually you do report first and then get feedback on the testimony, so it's usually
Okay,
Yeah.
no problem. Good morning. Thank you so much. I think first it's for the opportunity to have served in this capacity. I think that Commissioners Tom, myself, and Hayakawa all really enjoyed the opportunity to work together. So thank you just to our fellow members for entrusting us. I was asked to present on behalf of our commission, on behalf of our group, but I would ask Lila, please jump in at any point in time and feel free to add anything that I may have missed, clarify, et cetera. Obviously, we can't have discussion today, but I think we're all looking forward to having that. Commissioner Hayakawa also just wanted to note that, he really did want to be here and, apologize that he couldn't join in person and wasn't able to join via Zoom, but he is really played a key role in all of this work that we did, and as well as in this final report. I also just sort of want to put forward that what I'm hoping we can briefly walk through is the explanation and justification behind our recommendation. But we really did want to have a bit of a back and forth with the full commission. We wanted to hear from members of the impacted departments about how these recommendations might impact their work and how they are recruiting moving forward. And so we really are, unfortunately, the sunshine process doesn't allow a whole lot of back and forth, but we really are hoping that this is sort of an introductory conversation, and that at our next meeting and after we've heard from some of the departments, that we'll have an opportunity to flesh it out, talk through it a little more, and probably a final will be something a little bit different than what we're recommending today. So I think we're fully anticipating that. Okay, just, as chair has been reminded us, we understand that we can't have discussion today. But again, Lila, please jump in if I'm missing anything. So this next slide is intended to just help the full commission and the public understand the things that we as a group really honed in on. These were the core principles that guided our discussion. We, of course, were very strongly tied to the idea of what reasonable compensation was, as well as the reasonable relationship to bargaining unit 13 that has been a historic guiding post, if you will, for these positions. We tried to take an equitable approach to bringing positions current, as well as trying to attempt to compensate for past losses. That said, we want to be very clear that none of our recommendations are intended to be back pay. These are intended to be taking into account that there has been a failure to, because of the various economic things that were happening in our community, but there was a failure to increase rates over the last 4 years. And while the BU 13 rates continued to increase. And so we took those factors into account into the recommendations moving forward. We considered the position expectations. We considered some of the inversion issues that have been raised by Mayor Blangiardi, as well as through some of the materials that were provided by DHR, as well as comparisons that were provided across counties. And just want to thank OCS, our Corporation Counsel attorney, as well as DHR for doing quite a bit of work to help us really try to understand that picture fully. We also took a look at trying to understand what the area median income is here in Honolulu and what families in our community are generally living off of. We took into account Mayor Blangiardi's request to bring salaries up to a level that makes up for those lack of increases over the last 4 years, and then some of the related inversion impacts. We also considered some of the challenges that have been expressed in filling key leadership positions. We heard that from Prosecutor Ahm's office, we heard that from the Honolulu Police Commission. We've heard it in testimony from the fifth floor over the last year around different issues. And so we tried to take into consideration those historic challenges as well. And then finally, we tried to utilize both percentage increases together with lump sums, which we'll talk about shortly when we bring up the actual recommendation, to try to address the challenges of calculating those past losses. Essentially, there's such a variation between what those past losses potentially look like between the actual individuals that hold those seats. And so we tried to find a way that we thought was both equitable and reasonable without making it an overly complicated schedule. Okay, just a couple of things I wanted to, we saw at the last commission meeting, but good morning.
Can I take a pause and acknowledge, good morning.
Good morning.
Commissioner Sarah Gay's presence. Thank you for joining us. We're at the presentation of the salary report.
Thank you. Sorry, I meant to. Yeah. If any members of the public want to use a copy of these. Okay.
Sorry, thank you.
No, if I could just go back one just very briefly, just to orient you to where we were. We just sort of very briefly thanked the commission for the opportunity to serve in this capacity. This slide deck in front of you is essentially our thinking and walking through how we got to where we got to. But the thing that I wanted to make sure to express to the commission on behalf of our group is that we really are hoping this can be somewhat of a conversation, not today, unfortunately, but at the next meeting. I think we're hoping that we can talk through it and that we may get to a slightly different place. We may land somewhere slightly different than what's presented, and we appreciate and understand that. Okay. Thanks, Laia. So wanted to point out on the inversion table, one of the issues that we wrestled with is when there are positions within the department that actually earn more than the deputy or the director. And while there's nothing that prohibits inversion or requires that we solve it, we did hear from various departments that this can create challenges with recruitment, with promotion, and with management dynamics. And again, I remind our commission that this was something that was raised by Mayor Guangiardi in his testimony as well when he requested our consideration of cabinet salary increases. While the police department and the fire department do not have inversion as of the January 2023 update from DHR, I note, and I looked to Denise, I don't think that takes into consideration overtime. This is just
Correct, we never reflect overtime in any of these salaries.
so that's simply base. There were 13 positions across 8 departments where inversion challenges exist. And so this table is the table that was attachment G, as in girl, of the January board packet. On the next slide, we requested of the legislative branch that they conduct a similar inversion analysis, which they did provide. None of the departments within that branch had inversion, specifically Office of Council Services, the city clerk, or the Office of City Auditor, except the city council itself. And with respect to the city council itself, members are earning only $68,904, with the chair making slightly more at $76,968. There are 57 active members on the staff. I believe that means filled positions, and 77% of them make more. And just under half make more than the council chair. Also, with respect to the legislative branch, we took a look at this table that was provided by DHR as attachment C from our January board packet, and this is just that ending part of that attachment, showing that the legislative branch of the city and county earns essentially third among the 4 counties, just above Kauai County. And I think our discussion, of course, noted that this is despite Honolulu having the largest budget, largest staff, largest resident population. And then lastly, we also wanted to share that we took a look at the area median income. One of the things that we considered here, so this is a schedule that's published annually by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. It essentially provides a snapshot of what families here are making in Honolulu. the middle essentially being 100%. So 100% is the exact middle family of the respective family sizes that you see here. So without a clear guidepost for what council salaries have been tethered to traditionally, this is just one of the things that we sort of considered. Okay. Salary schedule scenarios. So as a group, we created 3 separate scenarios for the commission's consideration. I want to note that we really do believe that each one of these is a reasonable proposal. Each one of these is rooted in the overall principles that we shared earlier. We just go back a step, sorry. And the increases for each one of these scenarios is less than 0.1% over the FY23 budget. We do have a recommended scenario that I'll explain, but we want to note that these don't have to be taken comprehensively. So meaning if members like one part of one proposal and one part of one scenario and another part of another scenario, of course, that's something I think for us to discuss at the next meeting, and we can combine things to generate a new proposal. We also wanted to note that the mayor's letter with respect to requesting that salaries be increased to account for the BU 13 increases over the last 4 years, specifically requested 10.69%. That was a percentage that the letter indicated was calculated by adding together the last 4 years of the increases that were realized by the bargaining unit 13 members, but not by these appointed positions. We thought that it was more appropriate to calculate it through a compounding method as opposed to through a additive method. And so LIU actually and OCS actually supported us in helping to do some calculations. And so if there's questions on how those calculations were generated, next meeting, we can perhaps ask for some support to explain that. But essentially, the range of the increase, if we were to keep up, would be 12.54% to 17.07%. And the distinction between the two is essentially whether BU 13 members were eligible for 3-year progressions once in FY 2022 or whether they were eligible twice in both 21 and 24. So that's the reason why it's not just one figure, but there is essentially a range there. We also heard, as I mentioned, from the City Prosecutor's Office, Honolulu Police Commission, speaking to the challenges of recruitment and retention, especially directly related to pay compared to other jurisdictions. I think we see some of that reflected in some of the testimony. And with respect to the legislative branch, there was a lot of talk about the classification of council members as other than full-time, and essentially due to the flexibility that their position requires. Ultimately, we felt as members though, and what we tried to take into account is that the council members, in our experience and what we have heard, do work more than 40 hours a week and they do work year round. And so while we're not necessarily recommending any changes to the full-time definition, we were acknowledging the level of effort and level of time. Additionally, they oversee staff, they have public-facing responsibility in large constituencies. We felt that it was important to ensure that the salaries, though, and this is sort of a really fundamental principle that we tried to apply to all the positions, but I would say that it I think is especially highlighted given the disparity of the council member pay, that we wanted to ensure that we're attracting quality candidates to these positions. And that was really for us the primary driver in many of these recommendations. If we're paying members at a more reasonable amount as well, it would potentially mitigate the need for their having to seek outside employment that might have, certainly would have conflicts with their time availability, but might also have conflicts with their subject matter as well. So you'll see us proposing a few different ways to approach what we think is a more reasonable benchmark with respect to the council. Okay, all of that preface, drum roll. Again, 3 separate scenarios that we're recommending that we, again, believe all are reasonable and all are based in those principles we have in our union. Okay, so the way we laid it out was based upon attachment J in the January board packet. Attachment J does not include the deputy schedule ranges for corporation counsel and prosecutor deputies. our group is recommending that the ceiling for each of those is in alignment with the ordinance, which is essentially a 5% differential. So whatever the director is for that, so the prosecutor as well as the corporation counsel, it's essentially 5% below that. So we're recommending, the charter would allow the commission to go in a different direction other than what the ordinance provides for, because the charter of course supersedes, but we're recommending that it makes sense to stay in alignment with the ordinance on this. So again, it would simply be 5% lower than wherever the commission lands with respect to those two bodies. Okay, and then of course, I think also, that's not a question that we really investigated. So if there is testimony from any of those respective departments about that as well. So this first scenario reflects the top of the range of the loss due to lack of increases over the past 4 years. So this is a 17.07% increase. It's reflected here relatively across the board, except you'll see a couple of individual differences. One is bringing the Royal Hawaiian Band director up to the deputy level. Currently, they're paid below the deputy level. And then secondly, would be bringing the council members to the deputy level and the council chair to the director level. Scenario B reflects the lower end of the range to acknowledge 0 increases at 12.56%. In addition to the increase, we are also proposing a $5,000 one-time lump sum. I really am looking forward to chatting with DHR to try to understand how best this might be effectuated and what makes sense in terms of actually implementing a lump sum. This is, again, out of acknowledgement that the proposed increases only consider equal percentage increases going forward. It doesn't consider that the individuals didn't receive these increases over the last 4 years. To note, again, this is not back pay. That's not what we're recommending. Our understanding is that when we wouldn't have the authority to do back pay, but second, that it got very quickly complicated when we tried to start figuring out what exactly it would be based upon service periods, salary levels, et cetera. So depending upon the position, I also want to note that the $5,000 doesn't make up for that 4 years. I mean, those positions would have earned probably $20,000 or more if they had realized those increases. So again, this is sort of trying to strike a balance between recognizing that there has been some losses, but also balancing up and not making it up for those necessarily entirely. Here, the Royal Hawaiian Band director would see the same percent increase of their current with a lump sum. So it wouldn't be bringing them to the deputy level, but it would be offering them the same increase as the other positions. And then here is where we're introducing the idea of toggling the city council members to something other than just increases based on historic, what I think we all considered lows. And instead, we're suggesting that what HUD calls middle income, or 120% of the area median income for a family of 4, would be a reasonable level to consider bringing our council members. So the council chair position would then earn $10,000 above that in recognition of the additional duties of the chair of the council. So we'll come back to it, but this scenario B is the PIG's proposed scenario, our recommended scenario. Finally, scenario C maintains this 12.5% increase, but without the lump sum. That's the primary difference. And then secondly, the council members would it's still considered middle income by HUD. The council members would be at 100%, so essentially right at the middle of where our community is for a family of 4, with the chair at $10,000 above that in recognition of the additional duties of the chair of the council. So in sum, essentially our recommendation is scenario B, as I mentioned. We believe that this sort of balances the various concerns that I think we talked about in January, the things that we talked about here as well, and really is attempting to be rooted in these core principles. I also just wanted to note that this would resolve 9 of the 13 executive branch inversion issues and would leave us with 4 outstanding inversion issues. Lila, anything you want to add, amend?
No, I just wanna say that, I think as the PIG, we tried to take whatever information was available to us, whatever resources was available, give it due consideration and in our discussion, try to come up with what is, we thought, fair in terms of meeting what the salary commission's responsibilities are based on the charter. And I do want to, David and I would really like to thank Becky, Commission Member Soon, for all her hard work. She documented everything. We had lively discussions and we enjoyed being a part of it. However, as far as documenting it and presenting it in the fashion you see, it was all Becky. And she offered to do it and we gladly let her and relied on her and very much appreciate her stepping forward to do it for us. Thank you.
It was a great team effort, honestly.
And like Becky said, this is a starting point. We really try to consider everything that was put forth before us. However, we are looking forward to the discussions in the next meeting because this was the starting point to get everybody thinking and looking at ways that we could fulfill our obligation.
With
Thank
that, thank you, Chair, for your indulgence.
No, I want to thank all three of you for your really clearly thoughtful work, diligence, and Member Soon, you get the extra gold star for incredible PowerPoint skills and just organizational skills. Thank you so much, all three of you, for this really. I think we all look forward to the next meeting to be able to sort of flesh out our questions and decision process. So with that, because we are unable to have, I think, is this a good time to acknowledge that we were provided some information of executive salary pay inversions. I'm sorry, who provided this to us? DHR. So thank you, DHR, for this, so that we will have that as well for our continued conversation. So again, members, thank you so much. We will now move back to our agenda, or continue with our agenda. So we will now proceed with public testimonies. A, do you have any registered testifiers?
Sir, we have two departments who wish to comment and the DHR may wish to comment as well. So we can start with the prosecutors.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steve On? Thank you, prosecutor.
Yeah, I'll just, thank you, if, goes forward.
Yes, you can go up and down.
Good morning, everybody, thank you for the opportunity to address you. We took a whole look at the way salaries were handled at the prosecutors. When I worked there the first time, nobody knew what anybody else made. You had ideas, but nobody really knew. And then, when we came into the, I guess Civil Beat, as of several years ago, started publishing everybody's salary, which is a good thing, but I think every year a couple of people would quit, they'd say, that person makes more than me. And so when we came in, I probably would have kept on with that, because that's all I knew. But Shirley Noy, who came on as senior advisor, had been with the probation department and part of HGEA and having salary structures. So she came up with this idea about, why don't we look at the HGEA bargaining unit 13 for scientists and professionals and see about putting the deputies on that. They're not going to be in a union, but it would give them some transparency. And at the same time, we made a path through the office. So misdemeanors is level 1, vertical prosecution, sex assault, career criminal, elder abuse, that's level 5. So every deputy, so if they start with Flo Nakakuni in misdemeanors, which we have a strong preference for to help learn the right attitudes and working together from the start, they're going to be at the first level and at the highest level first number of years. So that's where they start. And then as they progress through the office, because they're all in their late 20s, 30s, typically, they're, having families, their mortgages. So now it's much more transparent. We also did a first in, first out of division procedure because we really are trying to avoid any bias, whether it's implicit or otherwise. And so if somebody, say, goes to the trials division, that's level 3. Then when there's an opening in screening, which is level 4, so they can learn how to do vertical prosecution, we ask the person who's been in that, if they're performing appropriately, which almost everybody is, we ask them, do you want to move on to the next division? If they want to stay where they are, they get to stay where they are. If they want to move on, they move on. So this, in the old days, I know when I worked there the first time, I became head of the district and family court division. Keith would ask me, Steve, who's the next person who want to move on to felonies? And so I'd look and give them my idea. And that's the way we started at the very beginning, 2 years ago when I came in. But that can lead to whoever the division is paying more attention to some guy who's really loud and out there about what they do, and that had raised a couple of questions. A couple of the female deputies, I think I'm being passed over unfairly. And so we think the combination of the salary structure, the path through the office, and the first out of the division policy has really helped to make things much more transparent and the like. So, but just to give you an idea of our office, a lot of places on the mainland, you have a city attorney doing misdemeanors, violations, traffic, and a county attorney, a DA, doing felony prosecution. Here in Hawaii, being as centralized as we are, the county prosecutors do everything. On paper, the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer, but through tradition, it's been delegated to the counties. They have a small, 10-person criminal justice division, a group that does COVID restrictions, welfare fraud, a couple of things like that, misdemeanors, petty misdemeanors, and a few felonies. But we here in Honolulu do 70% of the prosecutions in the state courts. So it's very busy. It's a very stressful job. Trial work is tremendously stressful. I know from my 15 years as a judge, it's more stressful for the attorneys than it is for the judge. It's just, but this is really important that, people, that they deal with that, because this is hard work. There's no question about it. And so in comparing us with the neighbor islands and with the Attorney General's office, Maui still, you can see, pays more than $20,000 more per deputy. It's always been a challenge to attract deputy prosecutors to the neighbor islands. Deputy public defenders have the same problem. So sometimes it's a statewide office. They order deputy public defenders here essentially to go to one of the neighbor islands to fill spots because it's hard to do. But so last year in 2021, we lost 5 deputies, 3 to Maui, 1 to Kauai, 1 to the AGs for more money. You're always going to lose a few every year because it is high stress. Trial work is tremendously stressful. And during the pandemic, courts weren't open, but police would still arrest people. We'd still charge people. So people's caseload grew from 30-some cases to 60-some cases. Very stressful when they're not. And a defense attorney is not going to plea bargain a case if no trials are going, because they're hoping it'll get dismissed for speedy trial reasons down the road. So with the Mayor Blangiardi, MD Formby, Budget Director Kawano, they're all sympathetic to our situation. So they gave us some money, City Council approved it. So we were able to raise our average salary to 104 for the deputies. And we're just a little bit ahead of Hawaii County, but we're still behind Kauai and Maui. Now, one thing that threw this into kind of flux is last year the legislature gave $3.3 million to the Attorney General's office to pay for raises. That, I think people join the prosecutor's office for different reasons. One, you may be committed to victims, holding people accountable in public safety. For other folks, it's more a job. And we lost a bunch of those folks to the AGs. Because right now, if people have 3 or more years of experience, they're getting $107,000 at the AG's office and hiring new deputies at $90,000. We started at about $75,500 for the new deputies. And with the increases last year, it went up to just under $82,000. But that's still, so I think we lost 11 deputies in 2022 to the Attorney General's office for that. You know, a couple more were let go, and then you lose the standard several every year because of the stress of the job. Now, so what we tried to do is think, what happens in other places? How does this work? And so the big organization for prosecutors nationwide is the National District Attorneys Association. And they have, they've looked and come up with national prosecution standards, and basically they're saying the salary of the prosecutor ought to be the same as the essentially chief judge of the general trial jurisdiction, so circuit court. In Hawaii, all the circuit judges make the same. So even if they're in a supervisory role like Judge Kawamura or Judge Browning, they make the same, and that's $207,000. And that's, so you can see, right now, this is my salary, this is what the circuit court judges make, $207,000. There are about, I think there are about 30 of them statewide. And, you know, I was a judge for 15 years, I worked very hard, you know, it was a good job, able to help a lot of people, you know, protect the community. But I probably supervised, you know, 3, 4, 5 people in my chambers. You know, I supervise a lot of defendants, but that's a little different story. But in my office now, there are 250, 260 people. It's a totally different situation. And every criminal justice challenge in Honolulu is at our doorstep. Working with HPD, trying to keep the community safe, we changed our domestic violence policy for charging. We're doing weed and seed, safe and sound. But it's very much engaged, and it's, you know, I worked hard as a judge. I'm working at least as hard as the prosecutor. So we also wanted to look around and tried to find like jurisdictions nearby to see how they were getting paid. And we looked at Seattle first, but and that prosecutor makes about $223,000, but that's a bigger jurisdiction. You know, if it was just Seattle, that would be fine, that would be comparable, but it's got some of the neighboring islands. But nearby Clark County, the DA there makes $203,000, and the Superior Court judge makes $213,000.
Sorry, Prosecutor, can you go back one slide? Yes, that one, thank you.
Sure.
It's actually not on that
Our
number.
printout is missing some of the.
Yeah, it's missing that
So that's- We
176.
have to write it down, yeah.
Sorry.
So, everybody got that, 17616, thank you, please go ahead.
Okay, so this is, you know, Clark County. In San Francisco, the Superior Court judge make $217,000, the district attorney makes $309,000, and it's about a comparable jurisdiction, about $1 million.
Do you know how many, Matt, how many they supervise?
I think the office has, I don't know, it's 125 deputies, something like that. I watched an interview with the former deputy who had quit and was part of the recall effort against Prosecutor Bodine. And now she was appointed first by the mayor and now elected. And it was great watching her because we're like this on issues. Because I found when I was running for this office, looking around the country, a lot of prosecutors or district attorneys were either lock everybody up or essentially let them all out. And I was really in the middle, which I think is the sweet spot. You know, some people absolutely need to be in prison to protect the rest of us. When they're there, they ought to get rehabilitation, they ought to get trained. I mean, it's sad when I talk to inmates, they would rather go do their time in Saguaro in Arizona, cut off from their families, because that private prison offers so many programs and classes and stuff. They have a lot of Native Hawaiian cultural things they can do. I think it helps they don't know the guards, you know, no history with them or their families, you know, it's kind of a fresh start. But But it really, and she and I are very simpatico on this, so I'm looking forward to talking to her about some of these issues. You know, it's like if somebody's selling a small amount of drugs, is it to feed their own habit? They need to go into drug treatment. Are they selling a lot of drugs? They need to go to prison. Each case should be handled individually. Santa Clara County Superior Court Judge, 218, District Attorney, 381.
For all of these that you have these comparisons to, I would be interested in, for our members, a comparison of how many deputy prosecutors these individuals are, the staff that that they're supervising.
Okay, and we just, I'm a little tired, we just came back from Miami last night. We went with the Judiciary Group, Public Defenders, Department of Health. We're gonna try this approach to people with serious mental illness who come into the court system and how to treat them. They have been a leader in this regard. And they've got tremendous number of people, and they say the average community has 3% people with serious mental illness across the population. They have 9.
Santa Clara,
Miami.
Miami.
And they think they have the 3 like everybody else. They also think that because of their destination and everything else, it's another 3, and they still think some of it's that Mariel boat people that were released out of prison, you know, so many years ago, that's contributing to it. So anyway, we just tried to look at some of these places. We made sure the populations were around the same. And that's how we came up with these comparisons. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for giving me a chance to share with you.
Take a moment. Members, any questions?
I had one quick question. Anyone else? Thank you for taking the time to be here today and also for talking, I think, with a number of the PIG members as well. We really appreciate your time and all that you've put into helping us understand the larger landscape. I think that's really valuable for us, but also for the public who may be tuning in to understand that context as well. I know you just saw it this morning, so I don't mean to put you on the spot in terms of reacting to anything, but I'm just wondering, the scenarios that we have been looking at. May I ask a question? Okay. The scenarios that we have been looking at with each, combined with the idea of following the 5% rule of having the top of the deputy range be 5% below, would essentially put the top of the range at either roughly 196, but this is for your deputies, 196, 193, or 188. Is that, in your opinion, do you have any reaction to whether or not that's sufficient? Is that something you feel comfortable talking about now, or do you need to talk to your team?
No, it's right now, we have 6 divisions in the office, 4 big trial divisions. And as it turns out, we have 6, we have 3 males, 3 females, and they make 160,000. And partly we're trying to keep, we're putting it there because the first deputy is at 168, so we don't want it any closer than that. So we would appreciate if these raises do go through, it would allow us in the future, we wouldn't go up to that certainly right away with it, but it would allow us to give a raise to those 3 big division chiefs. Because we are asking a lot of them. We're doing the officer-involved shooting investigations. Those alternate between the division chiefs leading the efforts of the largest divisions. So that, the higher it is, to give us more flexibility down the road. We definitely want, in that kind of organization, the first deputy should be making more than any of the division chiefs. And that's the case now, and that's why we could have gone up a few more thousand even for those division chiefs, but to me, it would get uncomfortably close to Tom Brady's. I mean, he and I worked in that office, the prosecutor's office, together back, 20 years ago. Really odd in some cases. And then at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I hired him, and he was there for 26 years. So we bring a lot, and even doing hiring now, I'm tempted to just pick them myself. Again, my leadership team, we talked about it, and so now we have panels that do all the interviews. So it's typically Flo and Tom and Cheryl doing the first interview of everybody. The division chief where people end up, and that's mostly Flo at these meetings. So that would give us flexibility, like I say, we certainly wouldn't be going there anytime soon to that kind of a max. But it would give us more flexibility to raise those division chiefs.
Anybody else have questions? Yes, member.
For Jeffrey Rosen from California, it lists his direct pay as $371. Other pay, what does that other pay include?
I didn't know that myself.
And the other benefits of 60, is that vacation, sick leave?
I think it's all,
added in there?
that's the way I take it. Because even just that first number was so much higher.
And
Yeah.
pension? Is it contributory by the employer?
I would assume so. But we didn't call them up and look. We're looking at public available documents to come up with these numbers.
Thank you.
Members, Chair has some questions. First, again, the previous request, if we can get some, if possible, to get some ideas of size. 3 questions. You noted in your testimony that there's, some migration to AGs. I believe AGs gets overtime. Do prosecutors get overtime?
No, and the AGs don't either.
They do not, okay. Okay, second question, related to recruitment and retention. Some of this discussion about increasing salaries is to, the idea of recruit and retention. Can you talk to us about some of the efforts you do in recruitment of the best and brightest in Hawaii?
Well, I think we want to make sure Richardson is going to be our prime source for prosecutors. So we are trying to talk to those deputies and those law students and relate to them in every way possible. And so they understand we're not just about sending people to prison. That's our primary job, is keeping the community safe. And I think, Keith Kaneshiro, Peter Carlisle had the same basic thing. But it's a lot more than that. It's doing things like Weed and Seed. It's working in the community outreach court, drug court, mental health court. And so they have a program for law students, typically third year, to go to court to try, traffic cases. And so I was happy a year ago, 4 people signed up for the defense clinic, 16 signed up for the prosecution clinic. So we're getting the message across, I think, because, even judges like Jack Tonaki, Dean Ochiai, even though they're on the civil calendar, I think they recognize if you want to learn how to be a trial attorney and get the most well-rounded experience, go to the prosecutor's office. No matter what you want to do down the road, because the prosecutors have to present the case. They have to call the witnesses. They have to lay it all out. The defense is trying to poke holes in your case. But as far as presenting a case, organizing it, the prosecutor, so we're trying to get that message across. Matt Devanch, who is our communications and legal counsel, who's now first deputy, he went to Paul Johnson, a well-respected firm, but he would tell the law students, come to the prosecutors first, because right now you go to a civil firm, it's really hard to get into court, really hard to get any trial experience. And if somebody is going to go to trial, they're going to want the named partner and the senior associates handling and not a new associate. So we're trying to get that message across. And I think we're successful with that. It's not, for some people, they're going to be there for several years and then move on with a bunch of jury trials under their belt.
So 2B to that question, part 2 of that question, is, so what is your target recruit class every year? Like, how many do you try to bring in from any
As
new?
many
as
as
you
we
can.
can. Honestly, we would like to get up to the 105. I came in at 89. And we have probably, and I did let several go when I came in. And then a number of other ones, like I said, some people, they watch Law and Order, and that's how they learn what a prosecutor does. And so when they, until you're there and you're in court most days of the week, you don't know if this is for you. And when I interview the folks, I tell them that. I didn't know, I thought I'd like it, but until you're in court every day, you don't know whether you like it. It's stressful, it's fun, it's really interesting, human events. So we really are I would love to get up to 105. What we've been doing is we've had people leave, we're constantly recruiting. constantly hiring. We're on Indeed now, we're on the city and county, we're on, just trying to get, we have 3 law clerks who are waiting for bar results. Because say somebody's charged with murder or they're arrested for murder, we're gonna pull out all the stops working with HPD to investigate the case as much as we can within 48 hours so we can charge that person and hold them. We do that with other cases, but we can't do that with all cases. But I'd love to get to the point where we had enough people in the screening section, so if a kid gets picked up driving a stolen car, we can charge him right away and get them, drug tested, get them into other things. Because right now, they're gonna get released pending investigation, and then maybe a few months later get charged. Well, he or she may have picked up some new offenses in the meantime. More car theft. So we're trying to do those kinds of things.
I have a last question on it, and we're gonna need to move on because we're gonna lose quorum, I think. Are we?
We'll have.
Okay. So my last question, you spoke earlier about going to Florida and the prisons, and I did watch the press conference for Sarah, Yara, and Mitchell Miyashiro and the accident that happened there.
Yeah.
The tragedy that happened there. And there seems to be, at least at the legislature, and to your point earlier, that there's some prosecutors that are prosecute everybody and jail everybody and don't prosecute everybody. And there is definitely some legislation pending that seems to be decriminalizing a number of felony statutes and whatnot to, in fact, decriminalize. That I believe the prosecutors and HPD alone are testifying against. What do you see your role in, and I understand mental health, I intimately understand it.
Yeah.
I intimately understand the jail system and the prison system. What do you find is, or consider your role in helping the public to understand and in advocacy? What I didn't hear in that whole press conference was the need for jail beds, jail space. I didn't hear it at all.
And this is the press conference the legislators had?
Yes.
Okay, and right now, and people don't, there's a lot of confusion. What's a jail cell? What's a prison cell?
Yes.
That type of thing. I mean, it helps that Cheryl was on the paroling authority too, so we have even more intimate knowledge of that. But we need to have a replacement jail, first and foremost. But all the neighbor island jails need to be rehabbed and upgraded.
Yes.
And I think with the number of beds we have statewide now, I think we can be okay. If we are able to, we're kind of negotiating and losing with the judiciary about hope probation because that's been a superior way to monitor people on probation. And showing women who are in hope probation go to prison half as often. 50% less often than women on regular probation. Native Hawaiians go 42% less often. So to keep the prison numbers down, we need to have good probation strategies. We met with Governor Lingle and her group, and I said, almost no women go to prison at sentencing, the original sentencing, because they don't commit the violent crimes. They don't commit the robbery in the first degree as often. They don't commit sex assault ones as much. Murder, manslaughter, men do more of that. So all these women get put on probation, but they're failing at more than 50% rate. So one of the advantages I think I have is, because I was a prosecutor, but then I was a judge for 15 years,
Yes.
I have a very different perspective, I think, on the criminal justice system. And again, the violent and dangerous folks need to be separated for society for a number of years, but they should get rehabilitation, they should get treatment inside. But other people, we should ask for probation, help them on probation, but do probation right. So I think my job is representing the average person who wants our system, they want to be kept safe. And they want our system to work and be as fair as possible. So if we can try to do both aims at the same time.
Prosecutor? I'm asking specifically about jails for this county, jail space. And sufficient space for this county and and the replacement of OCCC.
Which is why I agree with, and we met with Tommy Johnson, we met with the architects of the new jail, and I think they have their heads on straight about this. They realize a number of people need to be locked up, and a number of others are still gonna be locked up, but maybe not in as hard a jail cell. And so I think we, and they're looking at about the same numbers, 1,100, 12 numbers, 100 people in the jail, which is about what's at OCCC.
I'm just suggesting that it as part of your, I guess my question is, in your advocacy, in your role, that is there consideration for what this county needs to keep us safe overall? And
Yep.
we've learned as a county the importance of hospital beds. And I think when I look at the testimony on these bills, there are two entities, you and HPD, in line for public safety.
Well, and I can tell you, I've talked to Judge Green's folks, we need hundreds of more beds for mental health and drug and alcohol. I'm a huge believer in rehabilitation, but you have to have accountability with it.
Yes.
And if they design the jail right, if you're successful in reducing the numbers, you could close a wing and then reduce the number of people working in that wing. But we gotta keep people safe. That's my number one job. And I appreciate the thoughts, and we will keep pushing that the right way.
Thank you, prosecutor.
All right.
Thank you, members. Anything else? Thank you, sir.
Right here.
Any other testifiers? I believe you said there was one more.
Yes, we do also have the medical examiner. Did you wish to present or be available for comments?
I can just field any questions if there is questions.
Do you guys have any questions?
Any questions, members? Should I also acknowledge that we had received testimony from HPD Commission?
We received additional testimony, written
That's fine.
testimony from police commissioner.
Yes.
We don't have from medical examiners. Then the last one is if you have questions with DHR.
Okay, does anybody have questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the DHR director if possible. So if
Would you please?
Members of the commission answer any questions.
Could you please introduce yourself for?
I'm Naomi Asaki, I'm the Director of Human Resources for the city.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for being here. Similar to the questions we asked prosecutor in terms of recruitment effort, I'm not sure if you're able to, but if you can share in terms of for the cabinet, the kinds of positions we're looking at in terms of setting salaries, the recruitment efforts and maybe even more the difficulties that have been encountered, and perhaps your thoughts on the reasons why, or what you can share related to that kind of issue.
Thank you. I think that it's definitely been a challenge to fill vacancies when they come up in the cabinet. And most of the issues I think we're having is a lot of the cabinet level positions require specific criteria. They have to meet certain qualifications, almost all the directors do. And so that together with we can't compete with the private sector, we don't compete with the UH. So we can't it's hard to draw from those sectors to fill directors' jobs. In addition, the compression of the salaries to the most senior civil service individuals doesn't make any incentive for them to go and accept director level positions or deputy level positions. I mean, it just isn't worth it. A lot of them are too close to that same, for the incremental amount of increases and the enormous additional responsibilities. So it's difficult to promote internally, and it's also hard to recruit. It's hard to fill the vacancies. In addition, the retention is really a challenge, and that's where it's costing us. Because when we have directors who have been with the city for a year, 2 or 3 years, and they leave, usually they leave because the attractiveness of external private sector salaries, once they have a track record with the city, once they've proven that they can run a department, you know, they are attractive to the private sector. So we're at kind of a training ground, and it's expensive and costly to replace directors who know how to run a department. And it's the same at all levels of the civil service, all levels of employment. It's costly to replace, and retention is a problem for us. But it's mostly because we can't compete on salaries. And our, you know, over the last 20 years, what I'll say too is that our benefits have been eroded. The in 2 terms of a mayor, the appointees and elected officials who haven't already been in public sector cannot vest in their pension. But we still have to pay an 8%, you know, mandatory contribution to the city. And then I think, you know, there's other, it's complex, the benefits situation, but the fact that a long time ago, I think the benefits used to offset the salary, and the city was probably a really attractive place to work. And I think, you know, things have changed now. We have to be more competitive to get quality, get the best and the brightest. I think that the positions of the directors and the deputies are very challenging, and if we compare, you know, running a $4 billion enterprise with 20-something directors and the mayor and the managing director and their appointees, you know, with the private sector, it's vastly different in terms of what they are paying their executives.
Can we take a pause? Thank you for that answer. I want to take a moment to allow Member Soon to.
Apologize. Thank you all for your grace with this morning time change, and I'm sorry I had to leave. I'm okay. I guess my only, I would ask if perhaps at the next meeting, it doesn't have to be today, but at some point would like your department's feedback on the lump sum proposal and whether there's, what the most appropriate way would be to actually administer that, and if you have any feedback for how that would appropriately be implemented. Thank you.
See you on the next meeting and have a safe flight.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Josh.
she's in here. Oh, you are in.
Yeah, I mean, we'll
She's-
find out in 20 minutes.
Safe travels, good.
Thank you.
Uh,
Please eat, by the way.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? HR. Thank you. All right. Any other testifiers?
No, we don't have any other testifiers.
All right, thank you very much. We move on to announcements. Commissioners, are there any announcements? I have one. The next meeting will be our public hearing. It is scheduled for Tuesday, March 21st at 1:30. Please, let's not try to change it. Notice of the public hearing will be published at least 10 days prior to the hearing. All right, executive session. Pursuant to HRS sections 92-4 and 92-5A4, and upon taking an affirmative vote of 2/3 to do so, the commission may enter into executive session for the purpose of consulting with our legal counsel on questions and issues concerning the commissioner's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities in setting salaries as set forth in the city charter. The commission does not have to enter into an executive session if the commissioners do not have any questions or concerns to discuss with corporation counsel. To discuss whether to have an executive session, we need a motion on the agenda item. Do I have a motion to enter into executive session to discuss commission's powers and duties for this year or not? So moved, okay. Do I have a second? Seconded. It has been moved and seconded. We will now proceed with registered testimonies. Do we have any registered testifiers?
No, we do not.
All right. If there are any discussion from commissioners from entering into, is there any discussion from the commissioners for entering into executive session? Any objections? Noting no objections from the commissioners present, the salary commission will now resolve into executive session. The following persons will participate in executive session: all salary commissioners, corp counsel, and the commission aide. The commission is convening into a closed meeting pursuant to HRS 92-4 and 92-5A. 4, to consult with its attorneys on questions and issues pertaining to the powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities on items listed on the agenda for executive session. All non-executive session staff must leave the room. The meeting will stop while the commission is in executive session and resume upon the commission's return. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's her name? The secretary.
Our corporation counsel has disappeared.
Oh. She's coming back.